Hi, welcome back to Rambling Rose Farmhouse. I'm Missy, and today I am going to show you how I can my green beans. So I'm getting my canner ready here, and I need to take off the little weight because I don't need that yet. And my canner starts with 2 quarts of water in it. I'm not sure if all canners are that way. I'm sure that you can find out by looking in the directions that came with your canner. You put the right amount of water in your canner to start off with, and do make sure that you have the little rack in the bottom of it. So I've already added 1 quart of water. I'm going to add another quart of water into my canner because mine takes 2. And then I'm going to put it back here on the stove where I'm going to be using it. And so now that thing is ready. I want to talk to you a little bit about how I get my jars ready. I wash my jars by hand. Even when I had a dishwasher, I still washed my jars by hand because when you're cleaning them by hand, you can really see if there's anything stuck inside anywhere, and you can check the rim really well and make sure you don't have any chips or anything on it. If your rim of your jar has even a tiny little chip on it, it's not going to let the lid seal down. So it's not going to work. So you don't want to use a jar that has any kind of little chips or anything. So if you find a jar like that, go ahead and throw it out because it's really not going to be good for canning. And what I found, even if I keep it thinking, oh, I can use it for storage or whatever, at some point I'm going to pull it out when I'm canning, and if it accidentally makes it through into the canner, it's not going to be a good thing. So also, after I wash my jars by hand, when I had a dishwasher, which I don't have one now, so I'll tell you what I do now, but most of you probably have dishwashers. So what I would do after I wash them is I would run them through a cycle of the dishwasher by themselves, not with a dishwasher full of dirty dishes to where some food particles could come off and get up inside the jars and stick and stuff like that. I just would run them through a cycle by themselves and then leave them in the dishwasher closed up in there so they would stay warm, because you want your jars to be warm when you put them in the canner and start the canning process. So since I don't have a dishwasher anymore, what I do now is I use my water bath canner, and it's full of hot water. I wash my jars, I put them in there, and now I'm going to take them out of there and they'll be hot to fill with my beans and all of that. So normally I do all that back there on the stove, but I'm going to move them over here so that it'll be easier for me to show you what I do. So. Okay, so these jars are hot, just like they would be if you were taking them out of your dishwasher. I have my green beans that I've already snapped and washed, and I have another video showing you exactly how I get my green beans ready to can. So feel free to go and watch that video if you've never done this before, and if you have, then we're ready to move on to the next step. So once I have them snapped and washed, I'm going to put them into my warm jars. And now I like to push them down in here. I do want them to be below the rim here because that's how far my water's going to go, but I like to have my jars pretty full because I have 2 teenage boys at this point that eat a lot, and so if I get my jars packed pretty well, 1 quart jar is enough for me, my husband, and my 2 teen boys that like beans. You could use pint jars if, you know, you just have yourself and your husband, or just yourself, or just a couple of little children that don't eat a lot. That's another good thing about canning, is you can determine exactly, you know, what size you want to put up. But for me, quarts are pretty much what I've always done for my beans. I have done pints before though, like for my mom, because she's just by herself, and so sometimes I'll do some pints and give to her. So this is my third time canning beans so far this summer, and I always try to put up enough green beans to last our family for a whole year. And of course you have to determine how much that amount is for you. What I started off with when I made that my goal was to put up 52 quarts, and that way we could at least have green beans one time a week. And so that's a pretty good place to start. I do more than that now because we usually do have green beans more than one time a week. And right now I counted my jars, so I'm on my third cooking of green beans for this year, and I believe I still have 5 jars left from last year. So we had plenty of beans to eat them as much as we wanted, and still have enough to make it through the whole year. And it looks like this is going to end up being more than a cooking. And a cooking for me is 7 quarts, because that's what will fit into my canner at one time. I was kind of hoping that this would just be one, but it's not going to be. So I'll be doing this again shortly. Okay. So, got my beans packed down into my jars. Now I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt to each jar, because this is the recipe that I've used forever for doing green beans. And I am using mineral salt, this pink mineral salt, because this is what I have. But you can use regular salt from the, you know, normal salt. Okay, so got my green beans in my jars, got my salt in my jars, and the next thing that I'm going to do is add hot water. So you want to add hot water to each jar. And for green beans, you want to leave 1 inch of head space. So that inch of head space is to right here. If you look at your jar, and right where the top of the jar joins the bottom of the jar, you leave. So you leave this whole top space without any water in it. Canning vegetables is really not hard. Especially after you do it a little while, you just get into the routine and you know what you're doing. It can be a little bit frightening at first, but it's really not bad. So don't be afraid of it. Go ahead and give it a try. Okay, that one I got a little too much water in, so I'm gonna have to dump a little bit of it out. You need that airspace. Now I dumped a little too much out. But you need that airspace at the top of your jar to get a proper canning. But the next thing you need to do after you fill your jars with water is take your little plastic spatula and just kind of run it down in the jar, and it will release any air that is stuck down in there. So let's just do this to each one. I've placed my lids for my jars in a little bit of water in this pot. Put them on the stove and let them just warm up in the water a little bit, and then I'll take them off and put them on my jars. So while my lids are heating up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a damp paper towel, or you could use a rag, whatever you have, and we're going to run it along the edge of each jar just to make sure that there's nothing on the top of these jars. If a little grain of salt got on the jar or anything else, it will keep your lid from being able to get a good seal and sealing on your jar. So you always want to remember to wipe the lids of your jars before you put the lids on them. And the lids are probably ready, so I'm going to grab them. And they are. They don't have to boil, they just need to get warm. Which mine are pretty hot. And we're going to place them on here. Okay, and then we'll take our rings and put on each jar, and you just tighten this hand tight. So you want them tight, but not super tight. I'm gonna bring my canner over here to do it. It'll probably be pretty heavy to move, but you'll be able to see this bit. So I'll place my jars into the canner, and 7 jars fit in my canner, and I can adjust them where they're not touching each other once I get them in here. They're tight, but there is a little bit of space between each jar. And then the canner tells you where to line up to put your lid on, and then you make sure that you close it really tight, because this is the part that's going to be under pressure. So you want to make sure you get this lid on here good and tight. So the next step, I'll put the canner back over there on the stove, and I turn the heat on, and I'll just leave the heat on until steam starts escaping from the canner, and then I will add my weight here. And at that point is when it'll start building up pressure, and we'll watch the pressure. So let me put this over here and we'll get started. Okay, so I turn my fire up as high as it goes, and I will just have to sit here and watch this. It'll take 10 or 15 minutes until steam starts coming out of it. And when the steam starts coming out is when I will put my little weight on there, and we'll start the actual building up the pressure part to can the beans. Been boiling for probably about 10 minutes, so I've been letting the steam escape out of it, and now I'm going to I'm going to go and put the weight on it, and that's when I'll have to start watching this gauge pretty closely. So where I am at, I can my beans in quarts. I can them for 25 minutes at 10 pounds of pressure. Now that has to do with your altitude, and you can also find that information in the Ball Blue book. But you do need to find out exactly how you're supposed to do them wherever you live. But mine is 10 pounds of pressure for 25 minutes. So what I have to do now is I have to watch the gauge, and when it gets to 10 pounds of pressure, because I have my fire all the way up underneath the pot, when it gets to 10 pounds of pressure, I'll adjust that down and try to find the spot that will keep it evenly at 10 pounds of pressure for the whole 25 minutes. Just have to kind of stay close by and watch it the whole time. But so now we're actually into the canning part. It's almost a 10 now. So my pressure's up to 10 pounds now, and if you notice this little thing right here has popped out, that is showing that that canner is under pressure. So my gauge is showing 10 pounds. I've adjusted my heat underneath it a little bit, and I set my timer for 25 minutes. So now all I do is sit here and watch the gauge, watch the canner, and wait for the timer to go off. So my beans have been cooling in the canner, and I just kind of want to go over the process of how I cool them off. So once they are finished canning, I leave the canner sitting still, don't do anything with it. And then after the pressure is all gone down, and I still leave them sitting for a while, then I come and I just crack the lid on the canner. And I do it like it is right here. I just set it on top of it. Let them cool some more that way. And then I pull them out of the canner and sit them down on a dish towel. Now the reason I don't just run over there as soon as the pressure's down and open the lid is that your jars can crack if the temperature changes too quickly. I've never had it happen to me, but I've always been pretty careful about the way that I cool them down. So my cool down process is pretty lengthy. I canned these early this morning and they're still a little warm, but they're pretty cooled off. So I'm going to show you how I do this. What I do is I just take them right out of the canner and set them right here. And then what I do is I cover them up with another dish towel, because like I said, they're still warm and I still want to protect them from the really different temperature outside the canner than inside the canner. When they're completely cool, I go back and I take my rings off and I write the dates on there, and then I take them and put them in the pantry. These are some jars that I have already canned, and now they're cool, and I'm fixing to take the rings off of the jars. But I wanted to show you this because it's a very important part of the whole canning process, and that is checking your jars to make sure that they have sealed. And so the way you do that, you can either do it with the rings on or with the rings off, it doesn't really matter. But you just take your finger, you push down on each lid. You shouldn't hear any popping noises, and the lid should not move. That means they're sealed. They've sucked down onto the jar, not rounded anymore like they are when you first put them on there. So if you, I'm going to show you on a jar here that's obviously not sealed. If you press down on your lid and it moves and it makes that popping sound, then your jar is not sealed. So if you hear this and you feel, you know, you are able to push it down, your jar is not sealed. So what you need to do is you can either use that jar right then, you know, cook it that night, whatever. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not sealed, so it's not going to stay preserved. Or you can put it in the refrigerator. You can leave it there for, you know, a day or two and use it. Or you can send it back through your canner and try to seal it again. And if you're going to do that, what you need to do is take the lid off that's on there. Again, wipe your jar rim really well. Also check it for chips. Make sure there's not any chips on it. Make sure there's not anything on here that would have kept the jar from sealing. If you find something like that, then you need to put your vegetables or whatever you're canning into a different jar. But if you don't, then I would go ahead and switch out my lid, get a new one, and go back through the process of heating it up, putting it back on your jar, putting your ring back on it, and putting it back into the canner with the next batch of whatever it is that you're canning, and see if you can get it to seal that time. Sometimes it just doesn't seal and you really don't know why. But the most important thing is to make sure that your jars are sealed by checking them all as they cool off and you're able to touch them. I hope that this video was helpful to you. I hope you learned something about how to can your green beans. Like I said before, it's really not a hard process, especially once you get into the rhythm of doing it and you know what the next step is. It's just not that big of a deal. So I hope that you'll give it a try. You will be amazed at how amazing the vegetables that you can yourself taste, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. They're really healthy for your family, and it's just a really nice thing to know that you have vegetables put up for your family that will last for you a whole year. Thank you for joining me here today, and if you liked this video, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel so that you can see the other videos that I put up. And if you hit the little bell, you'll be notified when I do add another video. Thank you so much for being here, and please go visit my blog, ramblingrosefarmhouse.com, and look me up on Facebook and Instagram too. I would love to see you those other places also.